January. Before we begin, I'd like to go ahead and ask the committee members if they've had a chance to read the meeting minutes from the last meeting, which I believe was held on the 10th of September of 2018. Has everybody had a chance to read those?
Yes.
Are there any comments about anything in the meeting minutes that would like to be addressed? Does anybody have a motion to accept the meeting minutes as they are?
So moved.
Anybody second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Let it be noted the meeting minutes from the September meeting have been accepted as presented. On the agenda for tonight's meeting, I believe we have some old business, case number 2018 TAC-01, a letter from the building official dated 9 April 2018 requesting an advisory opinion on the Conservation Commission to allow the following. Petition of Atlantic Beach Suites LLC, which is the owner, by their attorney David P. Martland for a special use permit from section 602 articles 11 and 14 to permit a 23-unit hotel in the limited business zone and zone 1 of the Water Protection District. Said real estate located at 42 through 44 and 56 Wave Avenue and further identified as lots 4, 5, and 6 on tax assessor's plat 116 Northwest. Is there anybody here to represent the owner?
Yes. Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. David Martland on behalf of Atlantic Beach Suites 2 LLC. I'm here this evening with Lynn Small from Northeast Engineers, who is the professional engineer, civil engineer, who's undertaking the review and engineering of the project. What is before the commission this evening is a matter involving the redevelopment of the properties located at 42 through 44 and 56 Wave Avenue. It's plat 116 Northwest, lots 4, 5, and 6. It is essentially the area comprised of what is the Rusty's bar, as well as the residential units above Rusty's. That's the mixed-use building that's located on the property, and then to the north of that are 3 cottage units, residential units. That is the site that's being redeveloped. It's approximately 23,000 square feet. What's proposed is a 23-unit hotel. We're here this evening because that site is located in Zone 1 of the Watershed Protection District, and all uses not permitted by right or other, or uses permitted by right or by special use permit in the underlying district require a special use permit for the Watershed Protection District if located in Zone 1. That matter has been referred to this board by the zoning official for an advisory opinion to the zoning board. Interestingly, although it is located in Zone 1 of the Watershed Protection District because of its proximity to the Easton's Pond, none of the actual drainage from the site goes into the drinking water source.
Excuse me, can I interrupt? Before we begin, do you have any copies of that you can distribute to the board members at all? Or have they previously made available? Is there anybody here at the board who actually has copies of this? Just so.
No?
That's the plans.
I just want to make sure. I know I don't have anything in front of me. I just want to make sure at least we're referencing something without straining the eyeballs. Was there any information made available to the Conservation Committee previously?
Well, it probably went to Mr. Paquette. So, you know, when the referral is made by the building official, usually there are plan sets that are typically then provided. I'll see if I've got extra.
So was there any changes to, if this was originally petitioned on the 8th of April, is that right? That's according to the meeting minutes. I mean, according to the agenda Gary had previously posted. And I think, did we actually discussed this
Yes,
previously?
we looked at the plans previously, but there was no one here from the owners, so we just kind of guessed at what they were doing and generated some questions. sure if those were answered or not.
Or where it went from there.
Yeah, Gary had,
Let it be known.
yeah, that was almost a year ago.
The board is officially throwing Mr. Paquette under the bus at this present time. So do you have at least maybe one copy we could kind of huddle around and scratch, or if you want to bring that up closer to the commission? I don't want to waste anybody's time, but at the same time, we have to kind of know exactly where it is and what the features are that you think are noteworthy to be discussed. Leading up to the December meeting, there was no information that I saw put out about these plans, right?
I have this information now. Thanks. Kind of an impact statement.
Right.
That's all I
But no plans themselves.
If I could approach.
Yeah, please.
I've got one copy of the latest set.
Okay.
We do have two copies of the earlier set. There were some modifications made, let me just go back. There were some modifications made during the course of the technical review committee process that we could certainly go through. You know, there were issues raised by Mr. Hall, by Mr. O'Loughlin, as well as Crossman Engineering, who is the town's third-party consultant on some of the issues related to the stormwater drainage, the stormwater management system that was proposed. And so there were some revisions undertaken with respect to some of those comments. Those are all captured in
And the revised one.
in that revised.
Can we have if you have two copies of the old one, and at least we can send one down there and one down here, and then we can kind of just talk about the differences, or if you could highlight those.
They are substantially the same.
Right, exactly. So at least to give them some reference in terms of overall geography and layout, I think that would be helpful. Okay, I'm sorry. And feel free to-
No, thank you. As I was indicating, the matter is here to this board for an advisory opinion relative to the inclusion of this development in Zone 1 of the Watershed Protection District. This is located in Zone 1 because of the proximity to Eastern Pond, so it's within 200 feet of the pond. However, as the commission might be aware, the pond has a moat. The drainage associated with that ends up in the moat ends up going to Easton's Beach as opposed to going into the drinking water supply. So even though this is in the Watershed Protection District, it does not go into the drinking water supply.
And that's currently, correct?
Current.
And proposed?
And proposed.
Okay.
Now, currently on site, and Lynn will speak to this, you know, the site is fully developed. You know, you've got the Rusty's Bar. There's a parking area that has, you know, pavement that's, you know, essentially in disrepair. There are zero stormwater measures with that property. There's no stormwater treatment whatsoever, and any of the drainage is totally unmitigated. What's going to occur under the development conditions is a significant upgrade in a state-of-the-art type of facility for the treatment of the stormwater, both from a quality perspective and then also to make sure that it's developed in a manner to make sure that all the various storm events can be handled appropriately. You know, the 1, the 2, the 5, 10, 25, and 100-year storm events. Part of the development plan review process that has to be undertaken with a project of this nature, or really any project required to go through that process, is you've got to get state permits in advance of proceeding. And in this case, because of the proximity to the beach, the drainage features associated with that are the purview of CRMC. So we went to CRMC really on a preliminary determination basis. They won't issue final permits until you're done with the town, but before filing with the town, Lynn Small had filed applications with CRMC from a preliminary determination. CRMC reviewed and approved on a preliminary basis, subject to coming back to CRMC, this proposed plan set. There are some revisions that the town wanted, which will be further reviewed by CRMC, but we did have to go through and obtain those approvals. So that was done. We then filed with the town. We had, I think, 4 TRC meetings in which this was scrubbed down by town staff and the consulting engineer. Revisions made, received a recommendation for approval by the TRC. And last week we were before the planning board and received a positive recommendation from the planning board on the proposed project.
There are no state approvals required?
The only state approval that's required is through CRMC.
Oh, that's, okay, that's
Yeah.
not through the state.
Because there's an overlapping jurisdiction with some of the wetlands, and so CRMC is carved out a certain area, and DEM is carved out a different area when you've got those overlapping wetlands. And in this case, CRMC is the permitting authority because of the moat. But we're not located on a state road, so there are no DOT permits associated with the project. So if I could just call Lynn Small and ask Lynn to walk through the plan set, sort of explain the existing conditions and the drainage features associated with the site, and what she did from a perspective to meet the requirements for the town as laid out by the town ordinances, as well as the state requirements for the stormwater drainage. If you could just state your name for the record.
Lynn Small, Northeast Engineers, 55 John Clock Road, Middletown. My office completed the survey and all the site civil engineering for the project. The site comprises 2 separate lots. The Rusty's Bar. Does this one work?
I think that one's
Yeah.
working.
Or can I carry this one?
Oh, you can try it, and if there's an on switch, see if it goes.
Is it on?
Is there one on the bottom, maybe?
I have to be in front of the board.
Sure thing.
You know, I've been doing it for so long.
A second, we got help on its way.
I see a mute and a select. Yeah, okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so the existing site conditions comprise 2 existing lots of record, or 3 actually, 3 existing lots of record. One lot line goes right through the Rusty's building. We have 3 cottages on one lot, and then we have the Rusty's structure on the other site. Majority of the site is either the buildings or the access driveway, or the entire back area and side lot area for Rusty's is compacted gravel and pavement. It actually extends beyond the rear property line into the city of Newport's property. The storage container in the back of the property and the deck on one of the cottages also encroaches onto the city's property. All of these things will be fixed under the proposed conditions. We do have a couple utility poles on our property, or at least one. We'll be removing those as they're completely independent from the utility lines that run through the city of Newport. They're just on the site to provide electric to our own property. So those will be removed as a result of the improvements that we're making for the project. As Dave explained, we're proposing a new hotel. The site is in a floodplain, so the proposed building will be lifted up to provide the minimum separation from the coast and then additional. The site, while the building is located closer towards the roadway, meaning the front setback, it is centrally located across the site. So we have an entrance at the southern end and an exit at the northern end. You can park underneath the structure or in the back. The lower elevation of the building, underneath where the garage basically is, although it's all open, that's where you can get your stairways and your elevator. That's what these hatched areas are. You have to have 2 points of egress. So we have the stairwells and the elevators in 2 separate sections. We have our ADA parking as close to the door as possible. The drainage system for the site is the entire site. We basically have pervious pavement for the entire site. It does constitute as a redevelopment site because right now it's all compacted gravel or pavement except for some grass areas over here where the cottages are. We are bringing the site itself into better compliance. As you know, we have some encroachment issues with our deck going over the property line. Rusty's itself is too close to the southern boundary line. This project meets all of the setback requirements and lot coverage requirements. The drainage system has the pervious pavement, as you know, has the different layers of the stone, so you get the filtration. As a result of the improvements to the project, we'll be reducing the peak runoff to the site. Any overflow will go out through a discharge point at the back of the property, which, as Dave explained, goes to the moat, not to the reservoir. While it's very small, it's a reduction in that peak runoff from the site. The project meets your water quality treatment, your pre-treatment, and your reduction in your peak runoff. Also, while it's not necessarily associated with the watershed protection district, we have a property that's just to our immediate north that was recently redeveloped, and they put in new sidewalks. We're going to be continuing those sidewalks across the frontage of our property. On the site plan, you may note that Wave Ave has a bit of a curve in this area. The lot line goes straight. So we have this area where the right-of-way width actually widens and then gets back down. To make the site a little bit more uniform and aesthetically pleasing, the planning board has provided us a waiver. I think I put this upside down. Sorry. The planning board has provided us a waiver to put the proposed street trees within that piece of property. So while it's town property, and this was approved through the TRC and Tom McLaughlin's office reviewed it, but what this will do is improve the aesthetics of Wave Avenue versus just improving the aesthetics of the site, so it'll all feel uniform.
How wide is that here?
I'm sorry?
How wide is that distance out front, the trees out?
It gets to, and I'm just guessing, it gets to about 10 feet at its widest point, and then it goes down to closer to 5 at its narrowest point. Okay, we also have interior landscaping for the site, and as part of the planning board approval, we agreed to add a couple more trees to satisfy the parking tree requirement. The fire department, during one of the TRC reviews, had asked us to, instead of provide 10 feet of trees on the edge to make 5 feet of that reinforced turf so that they had better fire access through development. So that's what you see along the edge that's hatched on the landscape plan and on my office's plan. And then you have your row of vegetation to provide for a buffer. You also see on the drainage plan, and it appears on the landscape plan, that there's one hatched section on the northern end of the parking lot. This hatched section here is where we lined the drainage bait underneath the pervious pavement so that we wouldn't get infiltration into the groundwater. The test hole that we did on site was at the lower end of the property, and we know that we provide 3 feet of separation from that water table. It was my assumption that as you go uphill, on this site is probably all filled, so you would still have that separation. But during the TRC meeting, they asked us to do another test hole on the upper portion just to confirm that. And the soils there were all filled and inconclusive, so we couldn't call out an actual water table depth. So out of an abundance of caution, we just lined that section of the basin. Or not basin, but the pervious pavement beneath it.
So when you have an infiltration type of basin, you're required to have 3 feet of separation
Correct.
between the bottom of that basin and the groundwater table?
Right, correct.
Okay. And so for a portion of the site, we don't have that
Well,
separation
I
so that it's
suspect
lined,
we do,
correct?
but we couldn't provide proof of that, so we did the liner as an abundance of. So the project, because we have a large portion of the site that's unlined, we meet that groundwater recharge requirement regardless. So as a result, because the site under existing conditions has no provisions for stormwater quality or pretreatment, the project results in an improvement in the existing conditions of the site.
What is lining again?
It's basically you put a really thick piece of plastic underneath it so that you don't get, the groundwater doesn't go into the under.
Okay, so it doesn't penetrate.
So
down.
it does,
Okay,
exactly,
all right,
so
all
it
right.
doesn't penetrate, yep.
All right, and the site is serviced by public water and public sewer, so you don't have any potential contamination source from the septic system, is that correct?
Exactly, and we did get letters of availability from both agencies.
Is the roof water separate? Roof runoff, is the roof runoff separate from the parking lot runoff?
The roof runoff is, well, it's part of the building, but it goes into roof leaders that drain into the reservoir beneath the stone, beneath the pervious pavement. So basically there's different layers. The top layers provide you water quality treatment. The reservoir provides you storage. Okay, so those roof leaders go into the reservoir, so you're getting your peak runoff adjusted for, but it's essentially clean water. So because this is a redevelopment site, the state has regulations, and the town adopted those, to have regulations in place that promotes people redeveloping sites versus cutting a forest down and putting a new development in. So you're required to provide 50% of your water quality treatment on a redevelopment site. We chose to provide that water quality for the pavement area where you're getting the vehicular traffic versus the roof.
Can you take us through the pervious pavement or material that you use in the parking lot area?
So basically what happens is on a regular asphalt parking area, you're going to have 10 to 12 inches of gravel, depending on which town you're in, okay? On top of that, you're going to have 1.5 to 2 inches of binder, which is a flexible type of asphalt. And then on top of that, you're going to have another 1.5 to 2 inches of top coat, or what you see as your blacktop surface. It is essentially impervious, okay? You don't get stormwater infiltration. On a pervious pavement site, you have, the asphalt is 4 inches thick, and if you looked at it, it looks like almost like rocks are mixed into it. It makes for a more pervious material, okay? So you actually get, the stormwater flows right through it. And then you have different layers in your sub base with different sized stones, essentially, that basically help separate those different stone levels and then also provide your water quality treatment. At the very bottom, you have your reservoir area, which is basically for volume storage. On this site, we added underneath that entire detail, which is the regulated detail. It's gone through testing at the agencies in New Hampshire, or whatever it is. On this site, additionally, we have another foot of sand. So you're getting that extra layer.
How much gravel is there beneath the pervious surface?
There's no gravel, it's all stones.
Oh, well, yes.
So I
How deep is that?
believe it comes to about 30 inches plus the foot of stone. I mean, the foot of sand.
30 inches.
Is there any requirement to maintain it, like vacuuming it?
Yes, exactly. What you want to do is want to make sure you don't get a lot of sediments clogging it. So they do have you vacuum it about 4 times a year. So
Nice.
every 3
Part of
months.
the process here?
Yep, and it basically pulls all those things up.
We'll make sure that gets done.
Well, in the town of Middletown, they've come, it's going to be regulated both by the state and the town. Now, the town of Middletown has asked that projects recently provide those inspection and maintenance logs to both the building official and Warren's office.
Yeah, there is an ordinance that requires a reporting of the maintenance to the town engineer, but there was also a request to also provide copies of that to the building official as well. And so, one of the discussions I think we had at the TRC meeting was, you know, it would make sense if, certainly if it was done electronically, it's probably a better record-keeping system and easier to maintain and file so that folks are aware. But there should be a quarterly vacuuming, and that's part of the stormwater maintenance plan that's been approved.
Correct.
David, so would you anticipate having a typical sort of maintenance easement on this property that would incorporate that reporting requirement?
That's correct.
So there would be an easement agreement in place that would require with a maintenance schedule attached to it to require that to be maintained, and with a reporting requirement to the town to ensure that it's done.
I think Warren's going to need some additional staff to take over.
We just voted all the additional staff off, I think, on the last election, so good luck with that. So generally speaking, a drop of water falls out of the sky, hits anywhere on this property. It's either going to go through the pervious pavement into the reservoir beneath it, or it's going to come onto the top of the roof of the structure, go down the leaders and into the reservoir beneath
Correct.
this. So there's no drainage catch areas
sheet
at all,
runoff,
except for the one in the back.
What about the
And
rear?
the catch basin in the back, that comes directly out of the reservoir from beneath the property to handle the overflow, or can you explain that a little more?
That's your overflow. That's basically your outlet structure that provides for your high-intensity storms where this system is completely filled. But that's modeled, and we have the reduction in your peak runoff for all the storms for the project. So you just have to give a directional outlet for it, so it just doesn't break through the surface everywhere.
Is there a problem with the moat getting too full and blocking that up? Just
It goes towards the beach, so you don't have
the
to.
outflow pipe from the cistern, where is it, how high is that above the
Which
You
system?
gotta-
From your catchment area,
catchment area there?
From here?
right.
How does that get into the moat? Is it, they get 4 feet above the moat or 1 foot above the moat, or? There's gotta be some sort of a egress from the cistern.
I'm just looking for my grading. Oh, I have my grading, I'm sorry. Yeah, so it sheet flows into the moat. I don't have all the elevations of the moat, but if you've been to the site, you can see that it goes down gradient at that back corner. Right now, there is a small little berm towards the end of the property. That'll obviously be fixed. But it just sheet flows And so it's gonna go through the grasses, then get into the moat.
There's no possibility of the moat being so full that it'll back up.
Well, the project proposes a
Could-
reduction in the peak runoff.
Could I just jump in for a moment?
I'm sorry.
On that, with respect to the moat, just so the commission's aware, last year, the City of Newport Water Department received approval through CRMC to undertake maintenance associated with the moat, maintenance activities, as well as to really shore up some areas around the moat to make sure that areas where there were washouts and things of that nature for the berm are maintained. You know, I know that the city is going to be, this spring is going to be undertaking work associated with the moat to make sure that it's clear of debris and that the moat is working more efficiently for that drainage. Part of that is looking to remove encroachments that have encroached into certain areas, but that program is underway. Right now, the drainage from the site sort of goes unmitigated,
Right.
both to the street as well as to the moat. But now it will be a more controlled environment. In part, there are also encroachments for the parking area into that area currently.
Correct.
Those are going to be removed, and there are going to be some plantings associated with that to make sure that that area is restored to a more natural state.
Yeah,
Correct.
I mean, if you look at the landscape plan, we have it all, right now, the gravel parking area for Rusty's extends into the city property, which is closer to the moat and Eastern Pond. Under the proposed conditions, we're pulling all that back, and not only are we removing the compacted gravel that's inside the city's property, but we're providing an additional buffer and vegetating it. So it's not just grass, it's actual plantings. So it's going to provide a buffer to the moat, which you don't have under existing conditions at all. At least the areas where we can control within our site.
Have you submitted that landscape plan to the tree commission?
I believe that's a condition of planning?
Yeah,
or
we
it
did.
has been? Okay,
That's
so
correct.
we'll submit it.
We did, and they did comment on it, so. So that's been reviewed.
What happens to oil drippings from cars in the parking lot? It goes down into the pervious pavers?
Well, currently, any of the drippings just go onto the gravel parking area and are untreated. In the proposed situation, yes, they would go into into that pavement, and the first layer, I guess the sand layer would.
They tend to clog it up, or does it go all the way through?
Yeah, I mean, it gets captured in the stones and eventually.
Oh, in the stones beneath?
Yeah, I mean, they do studies for all of the low-impact development devices that were approved to use in the state of Rhode Island at an actual laboratory to make sure that they provide the proper pretreatment and water quality before they're actually approved for use in the state. So it's been vetted thoroughly in a lab to make sure that it provides that necessary water quality treatment.
I guess my question is kind of along the same lines. Normally, when we see a pervious surface in a parking lot or a thing like that, what the normal discussion is the first inch of water, or there's some metric that's used for the engineering studies, that's going to be treated. And the idea, I believe, is that any of the oil or car drippings that are in the parking lot are going to get into the treated area, and then anything in excess of the 1 inch or whatever the measurements are, the standards that are used, that will then flow to the catchment basins and the overflow. But the idea is that none of those car drippings are included with that because the first inch would already have been treated. In this system, I guess I'm saying is that if there's enough water on the pervious surface to inundate the pervious surface to the extent that the surface flow is going to go toward the catchment basin in the back, is that how that's
So
designed?
what happens is that outfall is coming out of your reservoir.
Out of the reservoir, right?
So that's below all of your treatment pieces.
Okay, so
Your-
that's why I asked,
everything
that's what I
goes
was
through
asking
the-
earlier. So the only water that should make it into that catchment basin is outflow from the reservoir beneath.
So
all of this, correct?
everything is pre-treated on this site, which is different than when you're right. I mean, normally we only have to provide pre-treatment water quality for the first inch,
I was right on that one.
right? On this site, everything that goes through that pervious pavement is
Okay.
gonna go through the filter layers.
Okay,
And then into your reservoir, and then eventually out,
got it. And there's
or
no,
not out.
and if this place, you know, the zillion-year storm, whatever you guys are using nowadays, and as they rewrite the standards every year, the ground water direction is where on this? Which way, you're saying right now, everything is flowing toward the street anyway? And the way it's graded, everything would still continue to flow toward the street?
Surface water?
Surface water.
Surface water.
I know ideally, we'd never have surface water. It'd all be absorbed by the big sponge that's the pervious surface, but,
So basically what happens is right now, the northern boundary of the site kind of flows to the north, and the southern boundary a little bit flows to the south, and the front flows towards Wave Ave, and then a large portion of the back flows towards the moat. Under proposed conditions, we're challenged with reducing that peak runoff to all of your property lines.
right.
So, we do that. Basically, for the two sides in the front, we're doing that by reducing the area that's flowing in that direction. And then for the area that flows towards the moat, we're doing that by providing that reservoir with some detention on site. So you have a peak reduction, you have a reduction in your peak runoff for all your storms to all your property lines.
Okay. And what is there, looking at the hotel itself, is there a emergency generator and/or a fuel source for that generator located on site? And if so, where would that be, do you know? And I was prompted thinking about that by, we understand it's all on stilts and it's going to be parking all beneath it. So if they have a generator, any idea if there will be a fuel source for that generator, or is it just natural gas coming out of the city lines, or?
Well, it is going to be hooked up to the natural gas. I don't think there were any plans for a
Right, we don't have a.
generator.
Okay, so there's no big fuel tank sitting up on stilts somewhere?
No, you wouldn't need that if it's hooked up to gas.
Right, that's what I was asking, so
Anyway, yeah,
we don't,
so-
there's no concerns that way, there's nothing,
No,
some big huge propane tank in the back
that we're
parks?
just not telling you about, no.
No. Or maybe it's there and I can't see it, so that's why I'm asking.
Buried in a tree.
Okay. Any other questions from the board members while they're at the podium? Anything else you folks would like to add while you're here at the podium?
No, there really wasn't anything further. I thought it was pretty, straightforward type of redevelopment where, I think there are some substantial upgrades to, over the current condition, where we can get some decent treatment of the stormwater. The technical review committee did a good job of scrubbing through everything and requesting modifications to what was proposed to, provide something that I think certainly meets or exceeds all of the town as well as the state requirements.
Okay. Is there anything from Peter or yourself before they, Nothing for these two individuals? Are there any comments? I'm sorry. That's what I say. Are there any other comments from any in the audience publicly would like to make regarding this proposal? Please come forward and just state your name and address, please.
Anton Rivera, 110 Indian Hill Road. My concern is the location to the water supply. Pervious pavers to allow water, surface water, to seep through into the ground. Also would allow, despite what it said, antifreeze, oil dripping from cars, anything spilt in the parking lot will find its way into the ground. Okay. We should use be very cautious about development within the watershed. One of the big suggestions from the state is to control development within the watershed. That's the best way, because once the water is polluted, we have a serious problem. And if our drinking water gets contaminated and Newport has to install millions of dollars worth of new equipment like they did a few years ago, Middletown's going to flip the bill. And especially if it's proven that we are the main contributors to the pollution.
Mm-hmm.
So I urge the committee to be very careful and do your research and take a lot of things that are said through engineers and lawyers with a grain of salt. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'd like to respond to that. And
Sure.
I really take umbrage at the fact that someone will get up here and say to take things with a grain of salt for engineers. I mean, Mr. Hall, Mr. Small, they are certified by the state of Rhode Island. They have licenses. They are bound by a code of ethics when they get up to present and review matters. You know, it is not just a grain of salt. It is their professional integrity. You know, they don't get up here and lie for clients. It just doesn't happen. And this has been reviewed by the town, by the town's consulting engineer. It's been reviewed by CRMC and will be further reviewed by CRMC with a final application. What we do know right now is there's absolutely no treatment for anything on that site. It's already a developed site. This isn't a virgin piece of land. This is a piece of land that's been developed. You know, I drove by the other night to take a look. There were at least 30 cars that were parked all over the place. So any of that antifreeze that Mr. Viveros is talking about, or oil, or anything of that nature, currently just goes onto the site and is untreated. There is millions of dollars in investment going to be made. There's going to be state-of-the-art, you know, treatment system reviewed by the town, by the consulting engineer, by the state. This creates a much better situation from a water quality standpoint. And the city of Newport is fully aware of the proposed development. They received notice of this. They were contacted in advance to make sure that there was water availability. They've raised no concerns relative to the watershed. And in fact, this doesn't contribute to the watershed. None of the drainage from this site does. Even though it's technically within the watershed protection district, this drainage does not contribute to the watershed. Thank you.
Certainly. And Mr. Viveros, again, without getting into any tit for tat, is there anything you'd like to add that we haven't heard already?
Well, I'd just like to take objection to that remark. Nobody said the word lying. I never said they lied. I just asked the committee to take what they said with a grain of salt. Because if what they say doesn't work, we have to suffer. They can make all the plans. They can say, if you do this, if you do that. But then, in reality, if it does not work, we suffer. And the town is going to be the ones that's going to have to do repairs. You know, taking care of it. It has these permeable segments have to be taken. They have to be maintained. They have to be vacuumed. You get sediment that fall into them. It clogs the drainage. That has to be removed. More material has to be replaced. If they get damaged, there has to be more. Now, who's going to maintain it? This is my concern. That if it doesn't work, the town's going to be liable because It all comes down to the lowest level. So, but that's what all I was saying was taking a grain of salt. Nobody was accusing anybody of lying.
Okay, thank you. Can I ask a question quickly?
Certainly.
Speaking to Mr. Viveros' concerns regarding the pervious pavement and the maintenance plan, and is there any data that demonstrates for a table that's used that demonstrates the effectiveness of this type of material when it's subjected to this type of use, i.e. number of parking spaces and a square footage of an area, that demonstrates the efficiency or effectiveness of the pervious surface to filter out the car drippings, as we're calling them this evening, over time? Is that at all a consideration, or arguably do the folks who've certified this type of material say it'll work just as good this year as it will 100 years from now, as long as you're vacuuming it once a quarter?
Yeah, so there were a lot of points there that you made, so let me just try to
Sure.
Unpack that a little bit and respond. So relative to studies, there are certainly studies that have been done with respect to this. I think one of the leaders in conducting studies relative to pervious pavement and its effectiveness is up at the University of New Hampshire. They've done lots of studies and have ongoing studies relative to that. The state of Rhode Island, DEM, has, they've actually reviewed those studies as well as other studies when they've put together their own updated stormwater manual. And so DEM has said, if you use this technique, and this is a state-approved technique in the stormwater manual, this is what you need to do. This is the media that you need to utilize in connection with that. So you need the pervious pavement, you need the sand filter, you need the different layers of stone. That is the type of treatment that is appropriate for pervious pavement to get the water quality that you need. As part of that, they have recommendations relative to the maintenance that one would need to undertake relative to that. So that folds into the stormwater management plan and the maintenance schedule that is listed on those plans, as well as in the site plans and the stormwater management report that's submitted. Then you take and you go to the town's requirements set forth in, I think it's chapter 153. Is that correct, Warren? 153. And there's a litany of items that an applicant, an owner, is required to undertake, and particularly on an ongoing basis. Now, one of the things that we generally do when we've got an application like this and you've got a special use permit requirement, and it's been recommended by Mr. Hall as well as the Technical Review Committee, is that there be a maintenance easement put into effect. And so, in addition to what the applicant's required to do, the maintenance easement would say, yeah, but if you're a bad boy and you don't do it, the town has got the right to come in, review it, and if something needs to be done, the town can do it and assess the property owner through the tax bill. So they can make a direct assessment against the property, which would then be a lien on the property. So you've got layers of protection relative to these situations. There was a lot of thought that went into promulgating those regulations on the town side, and we've spent a lot of time with the solicitor's office in going through maintenance agreements and access agreements so that the public health, safety, and welfare is protected, and to make sure the town's protected and not financially on the hook for anything. So kind of provides a little bit of an overview relative to that stuff. But yeah, when the state adopted the new stormwater regulations manual, you know, they did look at, you know, those peer reviews.
Okay, so the bottom line is that there may or may not have been those types of studies done, but at the end of the day, this meets all the standards that the state has for this type of a material in this type of a use.
Yes, and there were certainly
I'm
studies
sure there
done
were,
relative
but we
to
don't
that.
know them
Most of them at
right.
the University of New Hampshire. I don't know if Lynn wants to get up to speak to any of the studies.
No, I'm just,
Okay.
it doesn't seem as if, you know, you can quote them by verse, that's fine. But the bottom line is that these meet every requirement that's put in place for this type of a surface and this type of a purpose.
That's correct.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Please.
How many,
Oh, I'm sorry. Before you come up,
I just said, how many parking spaces are in the lot?
How many currently are in the lot or proposed?
Will be, yeah, with the,
Will be in the lot, so there's 20, there should be 27 would be what's required, but I don't know if it was more. 27 spaces.
okay, you have 23 units.
Yes.
please come up. Please state your name and address, please.
Valerie Galb, 94 Shore Drive. One of the things I think that didn't come out at all in the presentation is that this hotel is really kitchenettes or kitchens are in each unit, which then results in more sewage and different areas that could really kind of clog up and cause other issues. In addition, I met over the weekend with Mr. McLaughlin from Clean Ocean Access, talking about the moat situation. And the Newport Moat that goes around Easton Pond, as it was stated, that crosses over the road, you know, goes into the stream. And the concern has been, in 2018, the higher than normal bacteria levels. They're already elevated. We keep hearing this argument at the planning board, also here from Mr. Martland and the engineer that, you know, it's better than it was. That has nothing to do with planning, has nothing to do with clean water, has nothing to do with this current commission. It's all about not that it's better, you know, it's really about what are the standards and what's going to be best for our community. These pervious pavers, there's a Rhode Island Stormwater Design and Installation Standards Manual. Studies have been done. I find it interesting you're quoting University of New Hampshire when the University of Rhode Island studies, as well as the University of Minnesota, say these are never to be installed by a water supply because you can never use salt on them, and as been stated, they do need the regular maintenance for that. There's also been planting variances given to this particular property that might actually have mitigated some of the permeability that's needed for the surface. The moat itself, yeah, the way the moat is now, maybe it doesn't collect the same runoff, but you don't have 23 units with kitchens, with 23 units of cars, and places for the employees have to park, etc. That's how they came up with the 27 spaces. So my concern, and for me, is how do you approve something like this without understanding this moat situation, what's coming into here, the sewer capacity, the runoff. These are all things that people continue to bring up. The comprehensive plan talks about these flood areas. This is, as been noted, that it's in a 100-year flood zone. The water levels are rising as well as we're having increased storms, all which will contribute to bacteria and everything else getting into our oceans. And no one in this room or anywhere can tell me that nothing is going to penetrate through the water and get to our water system when you're that close to it. Thank you.
And Warren, just from your perspective, as I guess maybe the neutral party in the room when it comes to engineers,
Yes.
you can confirm that this material is certified by the state of Rhode Island, even if we do have salt on the cars and salt on the roads, that this material has been approved by the state of Rhode Island to be used in this type of a purpose?
It has, yes.
The pervious material?
Yes, it has.
Okay. And as far as the amount of sewer and the amount of water regarding the potential long-term nature of the tenants of these hotel rooms, whether they're extended stay or they have kitchenettes, which some places will and some places won't, the city of Newport handles the septic and handles the sewer and handles the water, and they've both certified that the type of sewer connections and that whole plan has been taken care of, and it'll all be done within the current standards, and that it will all be in accordance with an approved plan. Is that correct?
Yes, let me just take that in a couple of pieces. We've got availability letter for the sewer. So is there available capacity? Yes. With respect to the final plan approval for the sewer connections, that'll be subject to, submitting final plans to the city of Newport, which will require, grease traps and things of that nature to make sure, grease isn't going into the sewer from any of the kitchen facilities. So that is something that's done in connection with the application for building permit, is to get those final details done. You don't do that at this level of permitting, but that is a later permit that has to be obtained. It's got to be reviewed by the city to make sure that you've got those measures in place.
Okay. Are there any other comments from anybody in the room, from the public? Before we open up for motion, anybody here on the board have any open discussion before someone does make a motion about a particular approval or disapproval? Okay, is anybody have a motion? I'm sorry, go ahead.
I propose I make a motion that we approve.
Approve it as planned, but no?
As planned.
Are there any?
I
Okay.
hear no modifications. This is, what I'm hearing is this will
Mr. Chair,
definitely.
I would ask
Wait
for a
just a second.
second first before you begin
Yeah, before we
discussing
open
the motion.
discussion, I'm just trying to figure out if there's any other stipulations to your motion, or you just motion to accept as is?
Yes.
Okay, does anybody have a second to that motion?
I second.
Okay, is there any discussion amongst the board members about the motion, which, as it is now, is to accept the plans as presented to the board this evening? Does anybody have anything else they'd like to add, any discussion whatsoever? Okay, without any further discussion, I'd like to put to a vote. All in favor of accepting as presented this evening? Say aye. Aye. All against? Conservation Commission is certified or approved the motion as presented before us this evening. And thank you very much. And again, members of the public, thank you very much for coming out as well. Are there any other discussion items to be brought before the board as new discussion items before we adjourn for the evening?
I only have one, is wish we could get a copy of the engineering report before our meeting.
Right, and that's
Again,
Mr. Chair?
before.
We just weren't, it wasn't clear to us how you voted. Did you vote
Oh, it was all in
of the motion?
favor.
Okay.
Yes, it was
Okay.
unanimous. Yes, I'm
Okay,
sorry.
thank you.
So every meeting, we have an engineering report which is talked about, but we never see prior to our meeting. And we've had that happen 3 times now.
So in terms of how we can keep this from happening again, is this something that we think the information is being provided by
goes to
the
technical
applicants?
committee. It doesn't come to us.
So is there a process that should be followed that isn't currently being followed, or a recommendation we could make to the process to keep that from happening?
I would make sure that from now on, as these plans go through the TRC, the Technical Review Committee, and revisions are made and discussions and changes to the plans occur, I'll make sure that you do receive them. I'll get them to the chairman, yourself or Gary.
And if I could also bring up, because that's an interesting point about the TRCs, is there any sort of formal communication between the town process that's given directly to the other commissions, whether it's the Conservation Commission or whomever, when those TRCs are happening, just so in case one of us would like to attend? I'm sure they're in the open public meeting forum and we can go looking for them, but is there anything that's put out to all the other boards that meet that may or may not be interested in attending?
I'm not sure if that's true. I think sometimes the planning board may be aware of it just by virtue of the fact that the planning.
I guess that's kind of what I'm
on
getting
the
at.
Committee, it is a meeting that would be posted.
Right.
So there may be a way of
Well,
setting it up so that you would get notice.
And that's kind of what I'm
there's a way of
asking,
doing that.
is that when an application first comes, if this one was actually presented back in April 8th or whenever that was, and we know it's going to have to step through this process, maybe there could be some revision of the current process so that the boards are going to have to discuss this, or at least made aware, so it's kind of being fed to the boards, whether they choose to participate or not. That would give us a little bit more of an opportunity to maybe be aware and to take part in that process before it gets
And
here.
at a minimum, you should be getting that TRC report with the list of their recommendations.
Right.
I know that the planning board, when they're reviewing the project, they typically will have that memo from the TRC
Right.
Indicating what conditions, what recommendations, what revisions they're asking for. So certainly, you ought to have that as you're sitting here
Right.
today.
Because I don't think we've gotten that in the past, and I'm not here to throw Gary completely under the bus, but
Well, I think it's easier if the stuff comes in to town staff and then goes directly out to the
Exactly.
members, is a much more efficient way of handling it.
sure,
Yeah, I agree.
okay.
I
Yeah,
agree.
and typically the TRC approval gets sort of folded into a memo prepared by Ron Lansky to the planning board, and there's not necessarily a separate written decision relative to that. It usually includes that in that planning board memo, so maybe that could get circulated, and if we could, assist in providing any additional plans to, I don't know whether we should get those to Warren, or, if folks wanted them on email, they do have everything scanned in too, that can be shared.
Yeah, I'm sure we can come up with a way to make sure that you get everything
Sure.
you need well in
And again,
advance
it's not
of the
applicable in
meeting.
all the cases, but at least having a process that makes it available would be helpful, I think, going forward. Any other items for discussion all this evening before we adjourn? Okay, let the notes notice it's 6:35 from the Conservation Committee. Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. We have a motion to adjourn. Thank you very much.
Second.
All in favor? Thank you. Would you like your